Next, we have a delegation, Stephen Von Schikowski and Joyce Griffiths from respectively the Vancouver District Labour Council, and Joyce is a community member here to speak about insourcing of HandyDART.
Well, good evening, Mr. Von Schikowski, Ms. Griffiths. Nice to see you this evening. I will turn it over to you. I know Mr. DeJean's introduced yourself, but if you want to do a little further, if you wish. And then, do you have a presentation, like an online presentation, or just speaking?
No, just speaking.
Okay. And then you have up to 10 minutes to address council. So, over to you. Welcome this evening.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time this evening to speak for a few minutes to all of you about our Save Our HandyDART campaign. I'm Stephen Von Schikowski. I'm the president of the Vancouver District Labour Council. I'll pass it over to my colleague here to introduce herself.
My name is Joyce Griffiths. I am a member of QP 389, work at the school district, and I am a partner of a survivor of stroke.
So really appreciate the time this evening to speak for a few minutes about the important issue of safe, accessible, and publicly accountable paratransit here in Metro Vancouver. Our Labour Council is proudly a member of the Save Our HandyDART Coalition, which brings together Labour, seniors, disability rights groups, community groups, HandyDART riders, operators, and dispatchers to advocate for HandyDART service to be brought back in-house as a publicly operated service, which will equitably fulfill the needs of our communities. In our view, TransLink's current contracting model for HandyDART is broken, resulting in people with disabilities not being treated with the same level of dignity and respect as other transit users. Our coalition has been listening to the voices of HandyDART users, caregivers, and operators, and is doing everything possible to make sure that those voices are being heard. We held a town hall a little while ago with over 100 participants, and are also running a survey taking in feedback from HandyDART users. And what we're hearing is that the quality of our service fluctuates wildly from day to day. There are some days where call is booked and the service is fine and the experience is good. Others where the users are extremely frustrated and some truly harrowing stories are coming out. Increasing reliance on taxis is part of the issue at hand. Taxis are providing more and more of the HandyDART service year over year, and are simply not able to meet the same safety standards as HandyDART bus drivers are trained to provide, and that their buses are equipped to provide. We know that taxi usage has soared over the years, even before the pandemic. Most recent numbers obtained through FOIs revealed that taxis are being dispatched for 23% of trips or higher in some months. TransLink's own policy is to limit the use to 7%, so it is getting quite high compared to those goals. And it should be reserved for situations where where there are no other services available or a rider is stranded. Many participants in our town hall spoke courageously about their upsetting experiences with taxis, and stories from our town hall were featured on Global News and on other news stations and media outlets the following day. While we of course have nothing against taxi service or taxi drivers, the reality is that the taxi business model is based on quickly getting customers from point A to point B, right? That's the objective with that service. HandyDART bus operators go through 4 weeks of intense training, pass vulnerable sector record checks, and are closely scrutinized by supervisors and managers. The HandyDART model includes more specialized service and assistance that is needed by many riders. Every single time a new company takes over HandyDART's operation, the service loses years of progress and productivity. In comparison, conventional bus drivers working at Coast Mountain Bus Company can evolve and grow over the decades as they continue to rely on the basic level of consistency that is provided by having that employer year over year as a public subsidiary. The result, unfortunately, that we hear from HandyDART operators is that morale is increasingly low and recruitment and retention continue to prove very difficult. Meanwhile, Metro Vancouver's aging population creates an impending crisis where more people will be relying on paratransit in the years to come. The BC government just recently repatriated 4,000 healthcare workers, which demonstrates the feasibility of reversing privatization schemes when it's shown that they're not living up to their promise. HandyDART could also speed its transition to electrify its fleet. There's significant opportunity in accessing more provincial and federal funding for electrifying transit and building permanent in-house operation centers to do so if the service was housed in one ongoing employer. So now is the time to fix HandyDART by operating it as a subsidiary of TransLink. HandyDART riders, bus operators, and staff can't wait any longer. Public delivery of this critical infrastructure will bring stability, predictability, and greater accountability, which both users and workers deserve. And our open letter, which I think was circulated in advance, is calling for three things. Limiting the percentage of taxi trips to 7%, which is in line with current TransLink goals. Immediately conducting an unbiased public sector comparator with the full participation of HandyDART riders and workers to compare the costs and benefits of insourcing versus continued outsourcing, and developing and implementing a plan to bring HandyDART in-house as a subsidiary of TransLink. We've received support for our open letter from municipal leaders across the region, as well as many community and broad-based organizations. And we know that the ultimate decisions with this rest with the TransLink board and with the provincial government, but we feel it's important to build support across the region, show support in the community with local leaders like yourselves. And so encourage you, ask you to please support our open letter and its demands. And I want to pass it over to Joyce to tell her story. Thank you.
Thank you. In 2019, I became a partner of a family member who became struck with a stroke, and that altered her life quite drastically. Once she was released from hospital, part of the stroke program is to go to Lionsgate Hospital for follow-up with physiotherapy, speech therapy, as well as the lovely program we have on the North Shore called the North Shore Young Stroke Survivors Club. And to get to those events, she relied on HandyDART. HandyDART would come to the house, would come to the door. She would get the phone call ahead of time. They'd knock on the door. They'd help her to the van, and she would strike up a lovely conversation as she knew the drivers. Whether it was this driver today, that driver tomorrow, she recognized them. When a taxi came, the service was not the same. The phone call did not come. She would miss the taxi. They would drive on because they sat outside the house. She'd phone me in a panic. She missed her appointment. And then I would have to leave work and go and get her and take her to her event. On a few occasions, she would be down at Amica Center, which is the bottom of the hill at Highlands. She would come out to get the HandyDART. There would be no HandyDART there. She wouldn't see the taxi, and she would walk all the way up Highland in the pouring rain with her cane to come to our house just by Canyon Heights School. And then she would phone me and say, the taxi wasn't there. Well, the taxi was there, the bus wasn't there. And she, that's a long hill to go up. Another time she was at Lionsgate, again comes out, wondering where the bus is. There's the taxi. Nobody recognizes her because it's a different taxi driver. So she walked from Lionsgate Hospital to my parents' place at 17th, again in the pouring rain with a cane, and she was very, very frustrated. And I know that that story is not unique. It happens frequently. It just happens that she's a very strong-willed woman, and when there's nobody there for her, she takes matters in her own hands that could be a high risk, like a huge risk. So we are asking for council to sign on to this agreement, lobbying the government with TransLink to make HandyDART the priority for our residents here, because the North Shore Stroke Recovery Club has a huge amount of people who are residents of North Vancouver who go to programs all the time. They go to the hospital all the time for treatments, and that service is paramount to them. So I urge you to support that.
Thank you very much. And so ultimately, as I say, we're looking for, we hope to have support endorsement for our open letter with those three asks that I mentioned. And we think that the support, again, of municipal leaders like yourselves will go a long way to making the case that this is really something that residents of Metro Vancouver want to see happen, and that all residents of Metro Vancouver deserve the kind of quality access to public transportation that we all expect and deserve. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you very much to the two of you for your presentation this evening, and I would echo your comments. And thank you, Joyce, for sharing that story, that personal story. I really appreciate it because I think when we hear lived experiences, it really is far more impactful than when we just can imagine. And I'm sorry that that happened to your family member. I would just like council, if anyone has any questions or comments, I would just let council know that in previous conversations with Stefan, I had signed as mayor. I signed because we wanted it in advance of, and I forget who put out the report. No, there was the other, there was the other report that came out calling on sustainable, predictable, and the whole transportation. It was like a month ago. Yes. So, but your report. So, but I wanted. We couldn't get them on the agenda for a delegation until now. So, I want council to be able to provide comments, and then, if you so wish, we can put forth a motion to sign off as a council as well. So, I'll start with Councillor Shariari.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation. As someone, I have worked with outsourcing businesses on both sides, and I think there has to be some non-financial benefits, right, as you have pointed out, and those decisions cannot be, just focused on the finances, and I think that's maybe how this process has gone wrong, as I think I read in the report. So I think I support the public sector comparator, and in fact I support prioritizing quality and safety, right, over just the mere finances, as you have pointed out. And I agree that taxis are not a good substitute when the service is not available. I think your story, Joyce, was quite touching, and so I would say that we really need to get those percentages down. I think in the report it's at 17, and now it looks like it's already gone up to 23, but I think we do need to get that down as well. And with the aging population, I think this is not an issue that's going away, right? It's going to stay, and it needs to be addressed. And I think from an electrification point of view, I think I definitely support that, and I think TransLink needs to be a leader in that. And I think you have some also ideas about maintaining those vehicles within the transit TransLink or CNBC's operations, and I think that makes sense. So I fully support it. I'm happy to support a motion on this.
Okay, I will say we don't have a motion as yet. I believe Councillor Gerard has something to put forward. So what I will, which we can entertain once we receive the delegation, and then we'll do the correspondence. We can have a motion. So for right now, if there's just general comments, but if you have any questions for either Stefan or Joyce, that would be great. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, just for comments, I think that the points you're making are valid, and I think it's reasonable that you were suggesting going back to the 7% so that taxis are there if they're needed during, whether it's rush hours, I'll call it, and it's busy times, they can fill a percentage. And I know that some of the taxis have special taxis for this purpose. I have heard the comments about the desire to have more uniformity in terms of the services provided. And I can speak firsthand. Joyce, I had heart surgery a number of years ago, and part of the recovery was I live alone. I wasn't supposed to drive at that time, and so I took the HandyDART a couple of times.
We're supposed to drive?
After I went to the hospital and back in the HandyDART, then I drove my car. But I think that the other thing that I would suggest when the motion comes, I'll support it, that we need to get TransLink taking on a bigger role of this. And the problem, of course, is money, and that's always the challenge. I think also I'm going to ask that this be referred to our Advisory Committee on Disability for their information. I think this is something that clearly it's a transit issue, really is what we're talking about, so it's appropriate for council to deal with it on that basis. In terms of the function or the response for persons with disabilities, this is something that we have a committee that serves all 3 municipalities in the North Shore, one committee. And I think that this is something that should go to them, and they may choose to support it themselves. So congratulate you on it and please to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Oh, thanks so much, Your Worship. Thanks so much for the presentation. Good to see you, Joyce, again. And as Mayor Buchanan had indicated, certainly hearing the firsthand stories makes it very real. You know, when you have a family member who's reliant on that support, can't drive anymore, maybe once could, then the need for that service just gets highlighted. I have not read Transport 2050, but just from reading the report that was presented, you know, it's clear that it mostly ignores the challenge of our aging population and makes the HandyDART riders almost invisible. And I think the failure, as the report indicated, to increase HandyDART's transit service will most certainly put extra burden on our public health system and pressure on caregivers, no question. I mean, if somebody's having to leave work to take an elderly person to an appointment, hospital, it just affects everyone, adds to traffic. So no question, this is an important issue, and I'm happy to support it. And as Mayor Buchanan said, I'd like to be putting forward a motion this evening if council would consider it. And I'm happy to read the wording out now.
We'll just do questions and to the delegation, and then once we receive the correspondence, we can do
Perfect.
that. Okay, so I'll come back to you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Back.
Thanks so much for your presentation, and I am 100% in support of HandyDART. Over the years, I've known actually quite a few of the drivers and how they relate to the people that ride the HandyDART and the appreciation that the riders have of those drivers, because it's a familiar face to them. And I've definitely looked after a lot of older people over the years, and they're actually quite afraid of taxis. And I've heard it several times that they're nervous to take a taxi. They don't know who the driver is, and so the HandyDART is just that much more important for them. Also, just down the street from my house is it's a home where people that are recovering from strokes live, and how important that HandyDART is. It's there. I mean, I know that the house has a van, but the HandyDART is there on a very regular basis. And, you know, having talked to lots of these people, Anton Kolsky lived there. Joyce, I know you remember him. And how important that HandyDART is to them. So, yeah, I just want you to know I support you 100%. And thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. Councillor Valente.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I also want to extend my appreciation for your effort and a real focus on better outcomes for people. I also recognize the great work of Eric Doherty in the report there. He's one of my favorite Twitter contributors and obviously an authority on mobility issues. And I think the report was very thorough and really broad-based, outlining how we can make mobility truly accessible for everyone. So I guess I had some questions, or one question. My understanding right now is that HandyDART also on the North Shore does not cross the bridges, and maybe there's an opportunity here also for a broader look at HandyDART services as a whole. I don't know if there would be any comment, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, our view of it, of course, is that, as I said, every resident of the region deserves the same sort of quality public transportation that we all expect to get, right? And that's not currently the case, we believe, for HandyDART riders. And so, some of those limitations like that definitely need to be looked at to make sure that HandyDART service can serve all of the residents. I'm not sure the bridge situation, I think can be by increasing service, right? Increasing the number of HandyDART buses that are out there making trips can overcome maybe the concerns that are underlying the crossing bridges issue, right? Around buses getting stuck, not being able to get to their next place and stuff like that. So, you know, I think that we can tackle those things better when we have a consistent service provided in public service. So that's the goal.
Thanks very much, Your Worship.
Okay, great, thank you. Councillor McElroy.
Thank you. Nothing to add, really, just to echo the comments that have been stated so far. Thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us today and for sharing your personal story. Also really appreciated the depth of the report that was provided, really showing that this is a subject that's not being taken lightly. It is being taken very seriously, and that well-founded research is bringing forward, reasonable and founded policy requests. And so I appreciate the depth that has been put into the work of this, and I'm also happy to support the motion that I know is coming forward shortly. Thank you.
So I have a couple questions, and then I have a question for our staff too. So first I'll ask you, Stefan, when we spoke on the phone a few months back, because I know that there's been a lot of advocacy to mayors, and certainly mayors going back to their councils, etc. And as you know, Mayor's Council does not have authority over this particular matter. It's the TransLink Board. And so I had suggested that you go back to the TransLink Board and have this conversation as well. So I'm just curious, I know you did that, and I'm just, if you could share just high levels in terms of that conversation.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we did do that, and it actually has, over the course of those months, come to a very fruitful place. We recently had a meeting with the personnel at TransLink who are leading the review of the service that's currently getting close to getting underway, in order to, again, discuss these concerns and these recommendations around a public sector comparator being part of that process. That was actually very successful. We did get a commitment in that meeting from TransLink that a multiple accounts evaluation public sector comparator will be part of the process, and we'll be having ongoing meetings with their team there as that process rolls forward. So we're very excited about that. That's tremendously positive news for this issue. So yeah, that was good advice. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm actually happy with that outcome. And as you know, I also now sit on the board, albeit non-voting at this moment in time, but nonetheless, there's 5 mayors that will now sit on the board. So I think we will we'll at least have, we'll be a front row seat in terms of the conversation and be able to add to the conversation. So that's great to hear. We can move that along. And then I guess for Joyce, just in terms of beyond, because obviously with a family member who uses the service, you have contact and the role that you play within the union, et cetera. Any other stories that you're hearing from residents on the North Shore? Because sometimes what comes in front of myself as a mayor can often be at other parts of the region. So I'm just curious about the North Shore.
The thing that happens too is the North Shore Stroke Recovery Program runs a lot of programs on the North Shore, for those who may not know. And when they do an event, like a coffee in the park at Cap Dam, right, Cleveland Dam, there's logistics around that. And so trying to get people to be at this park at a certain time for the event is difficult, but the pickup becomes difficult as well. Like coordinating the fact that somebody's in Deep Cove, somebody lives, in Lower Lonsdale, and somebody lives by the bridge or by the dam. Trying to get that logistics, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 HandyDART rather than 1 to try and work that timing out. Or they're sitting. We finish the event at 12. And they're sitting for half an hour to 45 minutes. I mean, in the North Shore Stroke Recovery, the volunteers are fabulous. They sit with the people, they continue to talk. Family members or caregivers that are available will come and get them. But that whole timing issue is a big issue. But there are a lot. I mean, stroke, when you talk about what affects families, stroke is one of the highest rates of disability. And a lot of those people are younger. Like Mickey was 57 when she had her stroke. People that I'm meeting are in their 40s and 50s, early 60s maybe. They're not seniors, like they're not old. So here are people that are viable, contributing members to society in a lot of ways, but their life is altered drastically. And that being independent with a HandyDART totally changes it. So that's kind of what we're experiencing on the North Shore.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, that last point you made me think of this gentleman I met at a conference I was at who was 92 and had to give up his driving because of his vision. But he liked to, this is in a country that, or a city that has outstanding public transportation, and he liked to go, his story was he liked to go to the opera. And, you know, given this, the predictable, reliable transportation network in that city, he was able to maintain his independence, which we know for seniors is the number one thing that they want to be able to do. You know, if they have to give up their license, they still want to be independent, and so they really need to have that predictability and reliability. So it's important for their overall well-being. So thank you. And I have a question or two for staff, just in terms of, and maybe Karen, sorry. I'm just curious in terms of, because in the report that I read was around signal prioritization for HandyDART, and I'm just curious if they're currently allowed to use the bus lanes, and also just around the work that we're doing as a city around curbside management and what we're looking at in terms of making sure that we have, because many of our seniors are living in multifamily buildings, and how are we going to be managing that curbside management for this service, which would include taxis, I think.
Thank you. Good evening, through your worship. First, to address HandyDART and its ability to use our transit priority lanes, the answer is yes. Though there are a number of intersections that do provide transit priority, and it's through signal specific phases for transit vehicles. And so should the HandyDART be sitting over the detection loops in the right place, it will be detected by the signal and will be given that priority. And with respect to the work that staff is doing currently on curbside, it is certainly part of the various elements that we're looking that make up the equitable demand on the curbside space. So creating passenger pickup and drop-off locations, including that would be able to facilitate HandyDART pickup, is certainly a key part of that work coming forward to council for review, I think not too far in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. So those were all my questions. So just want to thank you both again for coming this evening, for providing the update and the report, and then also for all your work in terms of advocacy for Save Our HandyDART program. And we don't have any more questions for you, but this matter we'll now discuss just with the receiving the letter and the motion, so you can stick around for that. Thank you very much to you both. Councillor Gerard.
Thanks so much, Worship.
Oh, actually, sorry. It should go to Mr. DeJong first to move on to correspondence, and then we'll receive it, and then he can add a motion.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry.
No problem.
So the next item is correspondence from the delegation that we just heard from. And the recommendation is that the correspondence from Stephen Vancouver, President, Vancouver and District Labour Council, dated February 23rd, 2024, regarding insourcing HandyDART, be received for information and with thanks.
Great, thank you. And
I'm happy to support that motion and add a second motion, if I may, Your Worship. So I'll read the motion now, and I'm happy to provide a copy of that motion to the clerk after. The motion is that Council authorizes the Save Our HandyDART Coalition to add North Vancouver City Council as a signatory to the Coalition's open letter to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, Rob Fleming, which directs the TransLink Board to fulfill TransLink's original pledge to limit the percentage of taxi trips to 7% or lower of total HandyDART trips, provide accessible, affordable, and increased HandyDART transportation as part of the government's commitment to implementing the Accessible BC Act, develop and conduct an unbiased public sector comparator with multiple accounts evaluation containing rider and worker input to compare insourcing and continued outsourcing while taking into account safety and service quality, and develop and implement a plan to bring HandyDART in-house as a subsidiary of TransLink, including providing provincial and federal funds for permanent facilities for an expanded and electric HandyDART fleet.
Okay, and Councillor Bell, do you want to second that? And then
I'll second it and ask that there be an addition to the motion and that this report be forwarded to ACDI for their information.
yes, perfect. Okay, so moved and seconded. Okay. Councillor Jarrett, do you want to speak to it?
No, just that it's an important issue. It's an issue that we need to raise with government. It was a commitment that TransLink made, and they seem to be backing away from that commitment. And I think a bit of pressure is what they need to shine a light on the services that are needed, desperately needed by our seniors and in support of families in BC all around the province, but particularly here in the Lower Mainland and within the Transport 2050, I guess. Vision. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Bell.
Just the acknowledgement that Joyce mentioned, I think families with people with strokes, there's a variety of other medical conditions that the numbers seem to be increasing where this kind of service is essential for those people to have the ability to get to appointments, to go shopping and do different things. So I think it's very important.
Okay. Anybody else? I will just say thank you for bringing that forward, and again, thank you to our delegation that I will fully support this. I think we all want to make sure that transportation is safe, reliable, and accessible for everyone in our community, especially those that are most vulnerable, and that the care that they and the service that they get is by people who are specialized in being able to deliver that service. And I think, you know, the beauty of what I hear from many people who use that service is the relationship they build with the driver. And it isn't that they're necessarily always getting the same driver, but it's fairly consistent if they do. And that, you know, the people who build those relationships then know when things are not right or something's a little off. And so, you know, in that regard, we're providing even more safe and caring service to those in our community. I will say, you know, for a long time, this has been an issue for a very long time. And, you know, Transport 2050 is a relatively new document. And so, you know, we do need to be moving forward and making sure that the very essence of the values that we've put in that document and the principles and the objectives we're trying to achieve is really aligned with making sure that it serves everybody. I do know that, you know, Stefan and Joyce, you're well aware that TransLink and the transit service is under tremendous pressure right now. One, from growing pressures. We're the fastest, you know, return of ridership in North America. There's overcrowding throughout the system. There's growing financial pressures. And so we all have a role to play, not just at this table, but, you know, there are advocates from Save Our HandyDART in our union and residents alone, just to be making sure that our cities need to function well with a robust transportation network. That includes HandyDART service. So there's a myriad of services that fall under, including active transportation, et cetera. It isn't just HandyDART, and it isn't just the bus service. It's the complement of everything that makes it all work. But we all need to be making sure that we're holding both the provincial and federal government's feet to the fire to make sure that we have predictable, sustainable funding that we need to plan. We have extraordinary population growth that's happening in this region, far exceeding what I think has ever been expected. And we need to make sure that we have that robust system in place. And we have a growing population we're going to be a growing population of seniors and elderly people. And to your point, Ms. Griffiths, just around the fact that it isn't just elderly, it is many young people who are reliant on this service for a variety of different needs. So we will be having, there's an announcement on Wednesday here in the city with Mayor's Council and the provincial government. looking forward to the next year, and there will be then, once the provincial election gets into swing, there will be a full-on election campaign from Mayor's Council, and I encourage everyone to do their advocacy work in terms of, particularly councils around the table, to do their advocacy work in making sure that we can get the funding that we need to be able to expand this service, because the alternative is demise, and that is not a place we want to go at a time when we are seeing the amount of people that are coming to the region that are already using the system, and then the growing number of people that will be reliant on particularly HandyDART and the rest of the bus service. So thank you again very much for all your work on this. I'm assuming that our council is going to be endorsing this, and so, and I will, you have my commitment as I sit at that TransLink board to be a voice to make sure that we're moving forward to the commitment of getting to 7% of service. So thank you. So I will call the question. All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. Thank you.